Chapter 16, Understanding Principles of Persuasive Speaking. William Shakespeare said, "The power of speech to stir men's blood." Shakespeare could do that in his powerful speech, as he did in the play, for example, Julius Caesar, after Antony killed Caesar, and he stood before the crowd and said, "Friends, Romans, countrymen," and then he was able to stir them to the purposes and persuade them to the purposes that he desired. What is persuasion? It's the process of changing or reinforcing attitudes, beliefs, values, or behavior. So, what are attitudes? They're our likes, our dislikes. Our beliefs are what we understand to be true or false. And our values are endearing concepts of right or wrong, good or bad. When you look at this diagram, figure 16.1 found in your text, you see that attitudes are on the outside edge. They're much more easy to change. Our beliefs are a little bit more difficult, and our values are the hardest of all to change. So, how does persuasion work, and what will you be doing in your speeches to persuade? Aristotle had the traditional approach. First of all, he looked at ethos, or the ethical aspect, and how it might be changed. Then he looked at the logos, the word is how it is literally translated, and how words can change and persuade an audience. And then pathos, or the emotion. And part of what we tend to get to often is the emotion. You realize that speeches to persuade are speeches done by those who are running for public office. And what they are doing, what a person running for office is doing, is trying to persuade you to vote for him or her. And they approach that in an ethical way. They're asking you to look at the ethics of this. They ask you through word and use words to help you get persuaded to their side. And then they also appeal to the emotion of the audience. So, how does persuasion work? ELM is the elaboration likelihood model. So, how likely are we going to be persuaded? There's a direct approach and an indirect approach that you should look at in your text. Now let's look at how to motivate listeners. First of all, we want to use cognitive dissonance. Cognitive meaning of the mind or thoughts, and dissonance is the lack of harmony or agreement. You can use listeners' needs, use positive motivation, or use negative motivation. Here from table 16.1, you see the descriptions of cognitive dissonance and an example, and listeners' needs, safety needs, social needs. Positive motivation, how you will convince them that good things will happen if this occurs. That's exactly what a politician does. Here's what's going to happen that will be positive if you vote for me. And then they'll use negative motivation. If you don't vote for me, here's what might happen. So, how will you, as a speaker, motivate listeners? Use the lack of harmony or agreement. Use dissonance. People want consistency, they want balance. So, when you present to them that there is no harmony or that harmony is lacking, you can convince them. If people are unhappy they will change their attitudes, beliefs, values, or behaviors. Cognitive dissonance is that mental discomfort that prompts people to change when new and existing information conflict. So if there's something that exists and you bring about something that is new and it creates conflict, you'll be able to get them to think about the disharmony. Speakers, however, need to be ethical when choosing messages that create that disharmony. One of the speeches that I have done in the past with my classes is a smear speech, and it is a way of using words and expressions to make an audience believe one thing because they aren't aware of what it means. One of the examples is saying, and she matriculated to college, which simply means she went to college. But being aware of what the terms are will help you in determining whether you believe or you're motivated by what the speaker says. As speakers, though, how are we going to continue to motivate these listeners? We've got to discredit the source of the information. So a politician is discrediting the other politician. We refocus on parts of the message that don't create disharmony. Here's what's good. We seek new information to prove a speaker's ideas are wrong. We stop listening. We tune out. And then we change attitudes, beliefs, values, or behaviors to reduce that disharmony. We want to make sure that we use listeners' needs. So to convince someone, we've got to convince them about what they need. We want to have them change their attitudes, their beliefs, the values, or actions to restore those needs. And then persuasion occurs when listeners become convinced that changes will satisfy their needs. If you change, this will help you. Maslow says that humans are motivated by a variety of needs, and this is Maslow's hierarchy of needs: physiological needs, safety needs, social needs, self-esteem needs, and self-actualization needs. So continuing, how do we motivate listeners? We use positive motivation by emphasizing positive values and emphasize benefits, not just as features. If you vote for me, taxes will be lowered. Who doesn't want to pay fewer taxes? We can also use negative motivation and fear to persuade. If you do or don't, then this will occur. So the if-then approach might be used. You threaten listeners' loved ones. If you don't do this now, your children and your grandchildren, so you're threatening. You emphasize your credibility. Because of what I've done in office thus far, I'll be able to do more. You make the threat real and you make it scary. You provide a solution to the fear-inducing problem. Here's the problem: if you don't vote for me, but if you do vote for me, the problem will be resolved. Empower your listeners to act as well. So how will you develop your persuasive speech? You're not running for office, but what is it that you want to persuade your audience to do or to change? Consider the diversity in your audience and remember your ethical responsibilities as you are persuading. Select and narrow your topic just like you do in any other speech, and then determine, what is my persuasive purpose? Consider the audience as you develop your central and main ideas. Your proposition of fact: is this true? Your proposition of value: What's its worth or importance? And your proposition of policy, which is to get them to change. Gather your supporting material. When you use references and when you're able to support what you say by other sources, it makes you as a speaker more credible. Organize your speech, rehearse, 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 and then deliver your speech to persuade.